I'm also very optimistic. I'm that person, glass half full, rose tinted glasses. It's going to be all right. We're going to have to work for it. But I also am very clear that part of a movement on both fronts in terms of my identity, my identities, movement, in terms of my queer identity, movement, in terms of civil rights and justice for folks, and fighting, doing anti-oppression work, and confronting anti-Black racism, movement in terms of women reproductive rights. And so I got to have hope, right? And then I've also figured out that the work that I'm doing now, the representation, my living and staying healthy and keeping sane and taking care of myself, is for those who are going to come up in generations behind me. And so I'm okay with that. I can't do it all, but I can do something, and then it will continue, hopefully.
Oh my gosh. I mean, I just want to genuflect, you know. First of all, this visibility. And when you talk about representation, when you talk about the visibility, I think about so many people in the justice movements who've had to remain, quote, had to remain invisible. Yes. Because somehow they were not, what, I don't know, appropriate for public view, but I think about Bayard Rustin. And nobody, how many decades has it been before people have started to even say his name out loud? So when I hear you talk about all of the places that you're engaged and the organizations that you are working with, that is something that I go, yes, let's just take a bow and say, this is what needs to happen. And then that word movement, because that just sort of means nobody can put us in a box.
Right.
Nobody can say you belong here in this corner and you belong over there. And once people can put you in a box and say, well, this is your little piece of space and this is your little piece of space, that's a big setup, for just internal conflict, for getting folks, fighting each other. And then, of course, that becomes news. Oh, Walker, my son, whom likes to talk, talks about crabs in a barrel. And he loves to say, well, who put the barrel there? Whose barrel is it? Know, and once people can put you in a box, wow, that is such a setup. Yeah. And the self-care that, it is we as women, particularly women of African descent, you get told, you are good so long as you are useful and producing, and you got to take care of everybody else. You are everybody's, caretaker. Forget yourself. And I remember Katie Cannon, this theologian, said, "I will not be your mammy or your mule." Yeah, and right on. When you stop and say, "Yeah, this is what I do," because I also need to model this for all of those folks coming after me.
It doesn't serve us if we burn out, if we're not healthy, if we don't make it. I'm always like, sis, you got to get it together because you got to make it. Yeah. It doesn't help us if we don't make it, and we're not going to be able to fix all of this, but we're doing our part. So, and I like the idea, because there are going to be some difference even across, those of us who are in movement work. But I really believe in coalition building, because like in coalitions, you don't necessarily have to agree with everything the other person says, but you come together around this issue, around our rights and respect as human beings. And so if you're of any group that is discriminated against, why wouldn't you build coalition with other groups that are discriminated against? Because if we pay attention, although we do, some of us do, punch down, if you will, if I think there's probably a better term, but it's the same person, the dominant culture that has most of the power. Do you know what I mean? If we join together and say, there's enough for all of us, even among our difference. I mean, the fundamental values, I mean, there's going to be a split. That's always going to be there. But most of us really want to be able to be respected, to have our basic needs met, to be able to raise our children the way that we think is best for them, have good schools, parks and recreation. And life is short. Shoot.
Yeah. I mean, yeah. Just what? Who does green space? right?
Right.
Trees. I
Yes.
mean, trees as a justice
Hmm.
issue, you know,
Hmm.
and when
Yes.
we can come together and not buy into that myth that there's not enough. So if this
Right.
person who looks most like you or most proximal to you gets some, they took yours. So you
Right.
got to
Yeah. Yeah.
you got to be careful because lest you and them fight, right?
Right. Yeah.
Yeah. When the word woman or women, with however you spell it, you know,
Hmm.
with an X or an, you know, E,
Right.
whatever, when that word means to denote a certain group of people, generally cisgender, heterosexual, white women. If you know, you remember the book, I don't know, was it the early 80s? All of the men are black, all of the
And
women
all
are
of the
white,
women
but
are,
some of us are brave, right?
yeah.
And so,
Yeah.
so this thing that happens where your experience is erased when
Mhm.
you know the women is like a monolithic term, and to the
Yeah.
extent we buy into that definition and then have to do all the add-ons to say, well, I'm a qualified woman and this, I got to qualify my womanness
Yeah.
because uh
Hmm.
then that's a form of erasure that we
Yeah.
get asked to be asked to participate in, and it's sort of like a cultural um
Yeah.
sledgehammer. And
Hmm.
this notion of having to over like prove yourself, prove yourself, prove yourself, you know, this
Yeah.
expectation of I have got to show that I belong.
Yep.
You know, I've got to I don't know, every word I say is a test, and I'm only as good as the
Every word
last
that I say
test.
is going to be tested.
Tested,
Yes.
right, right,
Yeah.
right. And I'm only as good as that last test I took. You
Hmm.
know, nothing is taken for granted. And I think
Yeah.
when you walk around with this, with the experience of
Hmm.
knowing that your experience, your expertise is not is not taken for granted. It's not a presumption. You don't walk into a place with presumed competence
Yeah.
or
Right.
experience worth
And you
acknowledging.
can have it and still not be recognized and seen and acknowledged for it.
Absolutely.
I would be like,
Absolutely.
sometimes I'd be like, something like really great would happen, like this is in the context of like, being a nonprofit executive in a board situation, and something really great would happen. Like, I'll give it a real example. I had two meetings with a donor, and I got a $50,000 gift, and we go into a board meeting, and I'm excited because that's the thing that happened, in terms of the excitement for the month. And we're in the board meeting, and we're on the finances, and they talk about what the total is, but not that particular get. And I'm just like, I literally said, I remember saying, and I got a $50,000 gift.
Yes.
Like, so like,
Okay,
so
we
like,
got $75,000. Let's talk about $50,000 of it.
yes,
I got
yeah,
it.
yeah. So like that's a way, when I saw that, question, and what are the ways in which as a Black woman you are told to shrink? Like I like, I am, there's a local magazine, Cleveland Magazine, and once you get in their rotation, you're bound to be one of the most interesting people of some year.
Mhm.
And then there's Women on the Move, and then there's like the Cleveland 100, and then the Cleveland 500, and like I am on all of those lists, right? And then I watch other organizations, and other people who are also on those lists, and how their organizations, will, make a press release that they made the list, or social media, or I got to the point where I'm just like, I started questioning myself. Well, what, like, well, yeah, I guess I'm just on every list. I did that for a couple years, like, to like even testing it out, like sending it, like, look at what I did.
Mhm.
Like, I
Right.
always call my mama, but like, she
Yeah.
doesn't really get it. Like, she expects for me to be great, like, and get awards. And but that is a way. Again, I think, I start taking that in myself. Well, maybe, I'm being too vain if I want acknowledgement that I continue to represent on these lists. But I really am thinking about it, as a a kid that grew up, with the teen mom, and, on the east side of Cleveland, and went to Cleveland schools, and made it, and is now a lesbian, and it, living authentically, and somebody, it's going to matter to someone, like
Yes.
they're going to know that they can have some worth. So who wants to shrink? Sometimes I do because I'm exhausted, and
Mhm.
I'm really can be shy when I'm not feeling my most confident or whatever, but
Mhm. Yeah.
you don't need to shrink.
And we need to give ourselves room to be exhausted. But it's
Mm,
so important to remember that the way this big cultural sledgehammer works is once violated, one of the first things that happens is we turn against ourselves. It's
yeah.
like, oh, maybe I was too loud or too
Mm-hmm.
demanding or
Mm-hmm.
too vain or
Mm-hmm.
something. Because I mean, that's just kind of how it works. And I think we do have to remember, wait a minute, let me take some time,
Yeah.
still myself, see how my nervous system just got activated here so that I can move forward with truth and with purpose and just proclaiming what I need to say
Yeah.
and rest when I need to.
Well, I feel like I get that a lot because, I am a woman. Woman is synonymous with lesbian in my view. Um, and um, and I would say that I am a respected nonprofit executive in the greater Cleveland area. And I would say though, but still, I can only be so out. I mean, it's hard to not have the label given my title and where I work. Um, but the ways in which I feel like I am asked to shrink is that I am still in some um, instances more than I would like to admit, but that I understand the add-on. We can be inclusive. There's someone who is the head of the center that we can also add. And so I feel like um, that is a form of being asked to shrink. Do you know what I mean? Like, and it's hard to communicate that and articulate the feelings of that.
Mm.
Um, because I also want to be at the table because I also want to bring the perspective that I would have. I think it could add, I think I could learn. I think they can learn. I hope to bring other people with me. And so that's just like I feel like a more sort of like nuanced way. And in other ways, had been throughout my career. Do you know what I mean? Like the regular stuff that anybody who isn't, of the dominant culture has to learn to what I used to call manage up to,
Mm.
right? How do I deal with being talked over, ideas not being taken seriously until I have to triple prove that I know what I'm talking about, or just do it anyway and beg for forgiveness, but not really, because typically it's going to be a success, like just push through. And so, I'm unique in that, I am who I am in terms of my lived experiences, but I'm not so unique in terms of what happens to women in general.
Mhm. Mhm.
Mhm.
I like how you brought out the nuances. In some ways, it's nuanced, and in other ways, it's a sledgehammer.
Yeah, yeah. Like I have a I grew up with a mom who has expectation about having grace, you know,
Mhm.
and I feel like we can more and more as Black women, that also includes, really sharing who we are in terms of
Mhm.
our experience as Black women, and and sometimes it's not so graceful, like
Mhm.
it's not,
Mhm.
I believe in civility, so I would be considered like the young people, what they call it, respectability,
Mhm.
something politics or something like
Respectability
that.
of politics, yes.
Right. Yeah. So I believe in, I mean, but I will get you told, but it's with grace. And so I feel like, the idea is to not shrink in terms of talking about your lived experience, because if you do, people will just keep doing to you what they've done to you, right? I think it's for Black women in particular, probably brown women too, finding the balance.
Mm-hmm.
And so there's always a, Florence in the back of my brain, but then there's also this fiery part that said, if we need to change the narrative, and if I'm not part of that change, then, I want to be part of that change.
Absolutely. If I'm not part of the change, who else?
Yeah, right.
I'm here. I'm here for this. Yeah. No, you reminded me of Sister Alice Walker. You know what when she talked about how the elders, especially in the South, when they had to tell somebody something, they say, I had to bless them out.
Yes.
So sometimes when you
yes.
Sometimes when you're speaking your mind is a blessing, you are blessing them out. Right. And I think it's so important that we just sort of remember, though, again, the purpose of this. Because as you said, okay, call it what, some people might want to say, oh, this is respectability politics. It's respectability politics, I think, if I am colluding with the expectation that I'm supposed to keep everybody comfortable. Now, and that is an expectation. Yeah. I can tell you a couple of days ago, a friend and my niece and I went to see The Bluest Eye. It's now Lydia Diamond has adapted it as a play. Oh, wow. And as we were leaving, the three of us Black women sitting together, there were two white women sitting beside my friend, and I heard them talking, and I just heard this question, and I will say to you, this was not an ill-intentioned question. I really do not believe it was ill-intentioned. But the woman tapped my friend and said, I didn't get it. And I said, okay, and I'm leaving, because sometimes that's the best thing to do. Right. I'm not going to pay attention, but I'm wondering if she expects my friend to explain this novel to her. Yeah. I know my friend didn't do it because she was right behind my niece and me. Right. But what was interesting to me about it was just the expectation was, okay, now we've watched this. I'm going to be like, whole play. Yep. We've been sitting here for 100 minutes, no intermission. And at the end of it, while you're putting on your coat to step out into 17-degree weather, I'm going to turn to you and say, well, I didn't get it. Yeah. And what response was expected there? I honestly believe, without ill intention at all, the expectation was, you need to make me feel better about being here. Yeah. Explain it to me. Take care of me. So I feel okay. Yeah. So that I feel okay. Yeah. And when we find ourselves having to take, and it can be exhausting, but when we find ourselves having to take a breath and say, okay, how will I present in this moment in time and feel most authentic and filled with my own sense of integrity and purpose? Yep. Yeah, I love and we get to choose when we want to expend that kind of energy. I love it when I used to be a little bit more, I had it was righteous rage, but I was just like, do some research. And sometimes that is absolutely the appropriate response. Yeah, we get to choose. Lots of good ways to figure this play out. Yeah, Cliff notes. I don't know. Yeah, right. Yeah. As a Black woman, I just have great empathy for what we go through and trying to, and people understanding, if we are angry, we have absolutely a right to be. We're exhausted. We are, we're Black women, and every statistic that you can see where we fall prey to social ills, Black women are suffering, and we are amazing as well. Yeah. And so there's so much that despite the challenge and the call to silence, shrink, to not be seen, not be heard, only went to the pleasure of whoever has the power. Right. Like we're fighting against that. Like, yeah. Yeah, there are these narratives. The culture has a narrative for you, and it could be, the sexy siren, or it could be the angry person, or the caretaker, or the whatever. But it's an imposed narrative.
Yeah,
it's like, this is the narrative that keeps all of the power relations intact.
right.
And to do something to say, okay, no, this is jacked up, and I'm not going to agree with this narrative. There's more of me. The thing that's so wonderful about it is when we look back and see all of the ways that our elders have survived by pushing through, that cultural imperative, this thing that says you need to behave the way that I want you to behave. And, we have the elders who, my mother, was a single mom, raised me, domestic work. And, that was everything in her life that told her that she was not worthy. Right. But if I learned anything at all from her, it was that you're a person of dignity.
Yeah.
And you need to express that wherever you go. So, it could be everything from how I responded to people. She did not, I couldn't say like, no, like N-A-W.
Right.
Yeah. It was yes, and it was no. However, it was not yes, ma'am. And it was not no, sir, because that was too associated with servility. And as a woman who spent her, most waking hours of her day in somebody else's kitchen and cleaning their toilets and stuff, it was like, no. It's not the path that that defines
I'm
you.
doing this, or you can do something different. Yes.
Yeah. And it does not define you as a human being. And I've got to tell this short story. Promise you it's short. But she worked with a woman for years and years and years and years. But one of the ways that she was asked to shrink as a maid was to wear a uniform. And if you think about uniform, once you're uniformed, you're a person. It's like, put on this uniform.
Yeah.
And the woman came in and said, you need a uniform. And my mom just never would buy one. So one day she came in and she said, okay, Mary, here is your uniform. And I'm going to buy this one. So my mom, would never go in the street with that uniform on, but she would take that uniform, she'd wear it while she was in the house, pull it off, take her street clothes, catch the bus and come home. She did it out. She wore that uniform out, washing it and ironing it till that thing was so tattered, so faded that her boss came into her and said, Mary, you need another uniform. And my mother had the presence of mind, and this is the grace and the dignity and the blessing out at the same time. My mom had the presence of mind to say, no, you need me to have a new uniform.
Yes.
And that was the end of the conversations about uniforms. And so when you just think about, that was like in the 1950s in the racial apartheid South.
Yeah.
And that's the kind of, wisdom that our elders have passed on. So, but we're still having to negotiate that, right? Grace, dignity, and every now and then giving somebody a blessing.
Yeah. They will try to make you shrink to their idea of who you are. Yes.
One thing that comes to mind for me is the way that we have historically been asked to choose what kind of rights we want, or how we're supposed to have, how we're supposed to live lives of dignity. So this sort of, I call it like the internecine warfare sometimes that's stoked, like, oh, well, if you are woman positive, then you are Black male negative. That has, or if you are, I literally once had another Black woman say to me, I don't like the color lavender because that's the color of lesbians. And And so it was sort of like, okay, you got to be this kind of person and not that kind of person. You got to barter or for your respect and for your dignity in the world. And so, unfortunately, I think sadly, to this day, one of the things that really drives me crazy is this notion that, okay, if I have a little bit of privilege, then I'm going to use that to be more than you. I mean, since we live in this culture that says the only way for me to be somebody is for you to be nobody, even if that means turning on each other.
Yeah.
You know, so we might use religion to do it, or we might use sexual identity, gender identity to do it. We might use class to do it. But those are the things that come to mind to me when, again, it's sort of the, listen, how do we get in this barrel? You know, what is going on here that will keep us all, will keep these same disordered power arrangements intact? And, you know, while we are fighting for, well, I'm a Christian. And so as a Christian, I don't like this, or I am whatever. I mean, I just, yeah,
it's a lot. Yeah. I was thinking the same thing in that, you know, like, one of the things that happened to me, and I'll never forget it. And I'm a proud Unitarian Universalist, and part of it is like I'd like to be able to say that I understand who I am when it comes to my faith. But one of the things that happened, I was on my own pretty early on. My mom moved to Columbus. I was 18. I stayed here in Cleveland. My brother's in the Army, and that you know, and I have grandparents here and a couple aunties and uncle, but we're a very independent family. I'm on my own. And I was coming out of my apartment, and this very pleasant looking older Black woman who was dressed to the nines, I even think there was a hat, saw me, and you know, I gave way to her and opened the door, and regular, you know, mama raised you right smile and acknowledgement. And she said, "You look so familiar. What church do you belong to?" And at that point in my life, I didn't belong to a church. And I can't now, I wish I could remember, like, you know how you get older and your stories get embellished and different. I wish I can remember what exactly that I told her. But what I remember of the story is that I felt bad because I didn't have an answer. I don't remember what my answer, how I got out of it, but I didn't have an answer. And I still sort of like carry it with me. So I do think that some of the ways in which we do it to each other, like, is, you know, if you don't belong to a church, or you can call out a church that you attend, or if you are not part of a sorority, if you're not an AKA or a Delta, or I don't even know who the other ones are, so I'm that far removed from it. But I know that those two are important because they're always
okay. I gotta confess, AKA. Okay.
Yeah. So it's like we just like everyone else, you know, there's so many ways to be a Black woman, you know, like, and we're all going to have preferences, and we're all going to have our own bias about that. But we're also all, as Black women, just so under such scrutiny all the time. I think another example is, like, honest to goodness, I would not wear a bonnet out in the street, right, in public. It's just not my style. I'm not cute enough to pull anything close to wearing something like that on my head and be out in public, you know, like, but I think that was one of the ways in which, you know, like, it became sort of like this cultural thing. And I understand getting not wanting that for oneself or even one's daughter, or not even liking to see it. But I think it got really mean, you know, like, in terms of you know, how, you know, what people felt about how it represented Black women. And I also get that too. So there's this constant way in which we're, you know, we do it to ourselves in terms of living up to the ideal so that we can be accepted. And that ideal is just, more and more a Black woman, maybe even a dark-skinned Black woman, since Cicely Tyson and a Michelle Obama, and some of the
Mhm.
greats, Oprah, but
Mhm.
still it's an issue.
Mhm.
And then on a personal level, I feel that comes with, I know that I am accept. I'm more. I'm not. I wouldn't consider myself like very high femme. Like I don't wear lipstick, but I wear mascara, and I my gender expression is female, and I wear clothing that expresses that. And so I think in some ways part of my success initially earlier on is that I didn't look like your regular lesbian, whatever that is. I don't have a
Mhm.
plaid shirt. Plaid doesn't look good on this body. I mean,
Or
I
on
do
this body.
I do have comfortable shoes, though. I have very comfortable shoes.
I cannot tell you how happy I was when my physical therapist said, you need to stop wearing heels. I said, thank you.
Yeah. Yes. So I do, I don't know. It's a great question to ponder. And I think it's
Mm-hmm.
one that if I spend too much time on it, I feel sad.
Mm-hmm.
So I want to deflect and not really take it in the ways in which I've been asked to
Mm-hmm.
shrink by my sisters.
Right, right. And what you are reminding me of is just all of the ways that we can use anything to make ourselves feel better than someone else.
Yeah.
And this story may not even be true, but if you go on the internet for years, it's just been out there about
Mhm.
how do you keep people enslaved.
Mhm.
This so-called, I don't know if it's so-called or not. It could have happened. I don't know. But someone was supposed to. The story is they were going to the Caribbean to tell the colonialist how to enslave the native people there, and
Mhm.
one of the strategies was increase their differences,
Mhm.
make them think that they are so different from each other, and
Mhm.
one group is better than another group. They will enslave themselves. And I
Yeah.
think a part of the thing that I'm sort of feeling right now is how this dynamic works to keep us enslaved when we turn against each
Mhm.
other on
Yeah.
things like what colors, how light skinned, I mean, are you, and how dark skinned are
Mhm.
you? I mean, I know,
Mhm.
and anything can be used. I mean,
Yeah.
I know of certain churches. It was
Mhm.
like, well, light skinned people go to that church.
Mhm.
You'll never get in there,
Yeah.
or
Yeah.
much the same way as with, the Greek organizations.
Yeah.
Like, the light skinned people are here, the dark skinned people here, the party people are here. But it's all increase their differences, make them, distract them
Yeah.
from common cause,
Yeah.
distract them from who's setting up this stuff and who's really winning,
Right.
with all with all of this stuff. Who's winning when we decide, okay, the way I keep myself pristine is by making sure everybody knows that I'm better than you, and I'm not one
Yeah.
of them, whatever that them
Mhm.
might be, and that we can have a whole full experience of anything. There's more than one way to live in the world,
Yep.
and when we,
And you could choose not to live that way yourself without,
Mhm.
yeah. And that's the part that gets me, like, yeah, I don't dig a lot of things, but I'm not going to get so bent out of shape if it's not really hurting anyone. And it's not on, I want Black women to be represented well, but all you got to do is open your eyes and look.
Yeah.
It's not that hard.
It's
We're
not.
we're out,
It's not that hard.
yes.
It's not that hard. And I
Right.
have to tell you, I'm not a bonnet person either, which is probably more about my age or whatever. Uh,
Mhm.
and as you say, not hurting anybody. Except the one thing I would ask is like, and for whom are we wearing these bonnets? Who,
Yes.
like, is this another form of performative politics? And sometimes I'm sure it is, sometimes it isn't. I don't like bonnets, but I also don't like people showing up at Starbucks in their pajamas either. And so
Yeah.
that gets, so that's the same, when I see that and I
Right.
see, it's like, who told you to come? I don't want to see all this,
Yeah. There
and
is a
so,
whole thing about you don't walk out of the house looking a certain way, and there's certain things that are absolutely tied to that. And
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And in
Mhm.
my world, it was my mom and my grandma would say, you always show up, let the world know you have people.
Yeah.
Somebody cares about you.
That's so, that is so huge for our families. I say that to my mama all the time. I'm going, mom, so that they know you have people.
Yep.
Yes.
Yeah,
Yes, yes,
absolutely.
yes.
Absolutely. And if you
Mhm.
think about the ways that like media representations, and I don't know, I haven't seen much media recently to tell the truth,
Mhm.
but just through the centuries of like how we showed up in mass media, I would say even
Mhm.
up to um, I think the last movie I saw that where it was just killing me, it was a long time ago, was like Monsters Ball.
Okay.
It was like, huh, this doesn't even make sense.
Yeah.
If you think about the
Pretty back.
representation in literature and mass media, it was always, if there was sort of a hero type figure or some protagonist,
Mhm.
that person existed to serve the needs of a white person. So in order to do that, they couldn't have a family.
Yep.
There was no family. The help. I mean, that I
Didn't
didn't
want
see
I,
it. I
me
didn't see it. I
me
shouldn't talk about it.
either.
I didn't see it. But all I know is that I did have to do a talk about it one time, and I hadn't seen the movie, but I did.
Mhm.
You know how I was reading the book, kind of holding it far from me because I didn't want it to get on me too much.
Yeah.
And,
Yeah.
and so, but what was so amazing about that is how they stripped all of those women of a meaningful familial context. And if they had a
Mm.
family, they didn't get along with the family or
Yeah.
something, they didn't
Mhm.
have partners in their
Mhm.
lives, or they had children who got ignored, or children who were in some kind of trouble because their purpose was,
Mhm.
to help the whoever her name was.
Yeah.
And the like I said, I read the book trying to hold it far away from me.
We get tired of seeing movies like that. We know people in our families who had to live through that. I'm not paying no money to go see a movie.
Yeah,
That's
yeah, yeah, and especially with that kind of misrepresentation,
hmm Yeah.
And as I said to my niece and my friend the other day, when we were talking about Monsters Ball, I said that movie was so crazy because
hmm
first of all, in order to make Halle Berry serviceable to this
Yeah.
man, uh, they had to kill her son. It didn't make any sense for him to die. They had to kill him off in the movie so she could just be alone for him. And then
Miserable.
she had to be homeless. It's like,
Yeah.
don't you know, whatever her job was, she had girlfriends and somebody would have taken her in for a while. She didn't have to, but the
Yeah.
movie had to be made to say, your existence is to be serviceable.
Yeah.
And to the way that just gets taken in as the norm is a
hmm
form of like cultural shrinkage.
hmm Oof. Yeah. Well, Bell Hooks, it scared me at first. I was scared of her. Like her writing, and like when I hear her talking, she'd be like just going on about something. I'd be like, oh my gosh, we're in trouble. And then I learned to listen to her, and I read
Yeah.
Everyday Feminism, and I was just like, once I read Feminism for Everybody, I think it was
Mhm,
called.
mhm,
I wanted everybody to read it, and
mhm,
so. I feel like I learned about, bell hooks and Alice Walker, Angela Davis, June Jordan. I
mm,
learned about them all around the same time. So I was like, even Toni Morrison, like
yes.
all around the same time. And
Mhm,
to me, bell hooks was a little bit more of a firecracker, you
mhm,
know. I think Nikki Giovanni like really speaks her mind too. Like she's another auntie that you're just like there listen, like but Bell for me was that when I got to consider myself a bit more of an intellect in terms of how I understood blackness and myself as a woman in the world, and so I found going to her books allowed me for the practical application of uh, the why of the experience, if you will. Not that it was right or wrong, but
mhm,
that it was real, and I
mhm,
could understand it the way that she put it in her terms. And so, yeah, you know, and I really feel like um, it gave me, like I was a person who didn't really talk much until I was about 24, 25. Um, and um, and then reading Bell and others, it gave me a sense of self in terms of using my voice.
Yeah, voice. And I like how you said in her terms, because she changed the terms.
Mhm.
She said, we have a place here, because when everybody talked from the time folk were talking about, well, even as we go all the way back to, Elizabeth Cady Stanton and
Mm.
all those folks, and that first wave feminism, it was like, there were Black women involved, but they were told, get to the back of the line.
Yeah.
Literally, in that first parade, they were told, yeah, you can march, but you can't march with us. You have to bring up the rear of this
Mhm.
parade. And Bell Hooks, in all of her crotchetiness and in her brilliance and her humor,
Mhm.
she was just wholehearted. It's like, you don't get to pick, how I experience dignity. And
Mhm.
I was in I had the opportunity once to be uh, in the audience when she was on a panel with people like Cornel West and somebody else, some male sort of luminaries, whatever.
Mhm.
And Bell Hooks said, "I'm leaving." And she picked up her pocketbook like auntie, and she said, I don't have to sit here for this because I will not be talked over. And and I am not going to accept the definitions that are coming out of here by default. So I think when I think of Bell Hooks, I think of someone who is, whether you agree with everything, who needs to agree with everything anybody says? I don't agree with
Right.
myself half the time,
Good point.
So it's like when I think of her, I think of wholehearted living. And
Mm.
that's, for me, is
Mhm.
the legacy she is leaving for us to leave
Mhm.
to others.
Mhm. Live authentically. Yes. Very cool. Like I mentioned, I opened up with a little bit about the fact that I'm, at this point in my life, in my career, that I'm feeling like what's next. I also know that I don't want to work as hard as I did before, but I need to work. It's my cat.
A friend, a
Uh,
friend.
she's upset with me. It's time for her to have attention. But I feel like the the COVID and just the economy right now, and if you think about Black women and what we've been able to achieve in terms of opportunities around higher education and leadership and using our voice, I want to do something. And Sage and Maven is a consulting company that my former colleague and I, Ryan Clapton Zimler, formed 2 years ago after um, um, George Floyd, and we were answering calls from our colleagues, family members, friends who are white and who were saying, "What do we do?" And we were spending time individually with our connections around this, as everybody was, in angry and in disbelief, and really wanted justice. And we happened to be talking to each other about the fact that we were both carrying this and supporting each other. And we decided to form Sage and Maven because if we're going to be talking about this and helping people work through understanding implicit bias and doing anti-racism work and anti-Black racism work and justice work and equality work, that we would get paid for it. So whatever it is that I'm going to do next, I've decided that I'm gonna work hard. I have to work for at least 10 to 12 more years. And I am trying to figure out what that is, where I can also be fulfilled, be my authentic self, take what I've learned, and continue to support myself to have a quality of life that I want. So I am happy to be a consultant, to be able to do strategic planning, change management, the stuff that I love, diversity, equity, inclusion work, is we do some of that. But really feel like every other amazing Black woman who has decided to, what I call change the narrative in terms of what the expectation is for ourselves. And that is, I'm okay with finally saying, I am not trying to work that hard anymore. So, and that doesn't mean that I'm lazy. And I actually don't feel, whereas before I might say it and feel a little guilt and maybe I am. Nope, I don't think that I am. I think that I want to live, and I got to figure out how to have the quality of life that I need for myself, that, to be able to afford to live the way that I want. And I'm hoping, branching out, doing some adjunct teaching, nonprofit leadership, and, doing Sage and Maven and the consulting work, and also keeping my, role as a Cleveland leader in terms of civic engagement is hopefully going to give it to me what I need. So check back in, see if I have a plan for the next 10.
That sounds amazing.
About that. Yeah.
Sounds amazing. It's like living more to, the purpose is getting clear.
Yeah.
Right. So yeah, you're talking about working with clarified purpose and passion. And that just sounds amazing. That's where we need to be.
Thank you. I'll keep working on that.